let's talk muna what are we going to expect in this year's Sona or in this morning. Patrick, I know that the Senate will resume session at 10 a.m. Katulad din ng sa House of Representatives. Sa Senado, ano ba yung inaasahan natin? Magkakaroon ba ng probably some commotion this morning, or is it gonna be a peaceful opening of session there in the Senate?
Yeah, hopefully wala namang gulo dito sa Senado this time around. So far, typically yung leadership coup nangyayari sa on the day of the SONA, pero so far wala tayong naririnig na ganung rumor. Well, we're expecting, as usual, yung Senate President, this time Senator Win Gatchalian, to deliver his speech. And probably that speech will revolve around yung yung message niya earlier, even before, na yung goal niya is to restore yung trust sa Senado, given nga yung sunod-sunod na kaguluhan dito sa mga nakalipas na linggo or buwan. Well, for this day, for the session today, na-expect natin siya na maging brief based din dun sa mga nakaraang session during the opening ng Senado, na magiging mabilis ito dahil inaasahan na nga natin na itong mga senador ay pupunta dyan sa Batasang Pambansa sa Quezon City mula dito sa Pasay City para sa SONA ni President Ferdinand Marcos mamayang hapon. So, yun lang yung so far expectations natin today. Kanina patuloy natin nakita yung mga ilang guests na patuloy na pagdating nila dito sa session or dito sa session hall. Mayroong mga last minute preparations tayong nakikita patungkol nga dito sa paghahanda sa opening ng session mamaya-maya lang na 10 a.m. Dwight, kamusta naman dyan yung expectations sa pagdating dun sa opening ng session ngayong 10 a.m.?
Yes, Patrick, dito rin sa Kongreso, dito sa Batasang Pambansa, Congress will resume session at 10 a.m. And unlike in previous years, we are not hearing reports or rumors of a leadership shakeup. So it seems like steady naman yung leadership ni Boji D after a brief um, challenge, perhaps, if we can call it a challenge, to his leadership earlier this year when naalala natin yung National Unity Party expressed dissatisfaction sa leadership ng kasalukuyang speaker. Kasi yung calls of a leadership shakeup or the rumors of a leadership shakeup, yung mga speculations na to, usually they hounded Martin Romualdez when he was speaker at lumalakas yung mga ugong-ugong during the State of the Nation address. Ito po yung unang SONA ng Pangulo na ang nasa likuran niya ay si Speaker Boji D. As Speaker, si Congressman Boji, he has mostly avoided or evaded the headlines unlike his predecessor. Ang joke nga among House insiders is that he makes his statements so dull and if I can call it boring, because they mostly lack teeth. So, kahit yung mga reporters, nahihirapang hanapin kung alin yung newsworthy sa kanyang mga talumpate. Again, Speaker Boji seemingly and probably intentionally does not deliver speeches with a punch. So, they are so dull, but we are also expecting him to just boast about the legislative accomplishments of the House of Representatives since he became Speaker. And we're also expecting him to commit to working on the remaining priority measures of the Marcos Jr. administration. Actually, noong nakaraang linggo, he already released a video asserting that the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte won't derail the legislative work in the House of Representatives, while also calling on his counterpart in the Senate to expedite the passage of priority measures of the president. We can also expect the president's son, Majority Leader Sandro Marcos, to perhaps talk with the media after the opening of session today, or at least before the SONA begins. He usually does that every year na ipag-usap siya sa media, may ambush interview kapag panahon ng SONA. And these days, the soundbite of the majority leader holds much more weight given his proximity, given his close ties to President Marcos. This is the penultimate SONA of the chief executive, so we cannot underscore how important this is for the president, especially as he approaches the end of his presidency and as he tries to define what his legacy means. I'm going back to Bea, if Bea is now available, because I would like to ask kung ano ba yung inaasahan nating magiging talumpati ni Pangulong Marcos this year. Has he given us a teaser about what should the public expect today? Bea?
Hi, Dwight. Hi, Patrick. I am back. So again, like you mentioned, this is the second to the last SONA. It's been almost 4 years. Hard to believe since that banger of a line, di ba yung sinabi niyang not a square inch. 2 years na rin since that bombastic promise to shut down POGOs. But it's a very different reality for President Marcos right now. Just to give you an idea of where he is, -7 yung faction of this recording. But just to give you a quick snapshot again, SWS, 29% lang yung positive na approval kay President Marcos, 50% disapprove of his performance. Based on polls, only 28% trust the president, 38% trust based on SWS. Sa lagay na ito, the -7 is in fact an improvement from his numbers just in March 2026. That would be his lowest so far. He has 2 more years to make sure he doesn't hit another low in terms of approval ratings. Yung numbers ni Marcos right now, they are worse than the late President Fidel Ramos and the late Benigno Aquino third, but a little better than former President Arroyo. That's not really a high bar to clear. So, kumbaga, the past 4 years, the reality has sunk in, and no doubt, by yung SONA this year, the focus will be on anti-corruption and flood control. Frankly, mostly because of his own doing. Kasi si President Marcos naman yung naglatag ng agenda na ito during his 2025 SONA. So the spotlight is, of course, on that flood control issue. Early on, right after the 2025 SONA, nag-release ng trove of data yung Marcos administration. Notably, he challenged investigative journalists to do their job. And I think they did, a lot of them, your work, Dwight, your work, Patrick, right? And all of our other colleagues in Rappler and our colleagues in other publications as well. The rhetoric has been strong from the admin, but the follow-through, not as much, right? I think what we have to contend and what Marcos has to contend today as he delivers his SONA is that asa na ba yung mga cases na pinapangako niya noong December pa lang last year, nagkaroon ng ICI. Ang dami na nangyari, frankly, right? You have the ombudsman announcing the possible filing of cases. But I think there is still quite a hunger from the public to actually see the Marcos administration follow through with what he promised to be a very strong clampdown against corruption. I am remiss if I don't talk about the external pressures. After all, Marcos himself pointed this out. Ang pinaka-apparent na external pressure, of course, would be the US and Israel's war on Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is again difficult to access, which translates into higher prices of basic commodities in the Philippines. This morning on the radio, we expect an increase again in the cost of fuel, which would translate eventually to an increase in the cost of goods. Inflation in June 2026 stood at 6.4%. Yung first half of the year inflation rather, much higher than earlier government projections, again because of the conflict in Iran. In fact, 18% of respondents, based on that earlier survey on the expectations of the 2026 SONA, expect the president, or they want the president to speak about how his administration is addressing yung basic price or yung rise in the price of goods, or frankly, to sum it all up, no, yung affordability na crisis, if you would call it that, na nararamdaman ng average Filipino. So, but it's interesting because usually you do have inflation and the price of goods as the top priority. But I guess ito na rin yung effect ng bully pulpit of Malacanang because Marcos put a spotlight on corruption in the 2025 Sona. It carries on up until 2026 na ito yung focus talaga ng State of the Nation Address. Kailangan ko rin i-mention yung South China Sea. He made no mention of this in the 2025 Sona. He only made a fleeting mention of foreign policy, yung friend to all, enemy to none. So we'll see this time if President Marcos mentions that explicitly. Of course, this is context. Yung context nito ay just a week ago. We had tensions in Ayungin Shoal for the first time in over 2 years, or at least publicized yung tensions sa Ayungin Shoal. And then just Thursday and Friday, you had confrontations between China and the Philippines in Bajo de Masinloc, another feature, a different feature in the South China Sea. Marcos has said, of course, that he wants a reset of ties with Beijing. Another added complication to that would be the Philippines' chairmanship of ASEAN and the dream of having a code of conduct in the South China Sea by the end of 2026. But all of that to say, kahit beat ko ang defense at foreign policy, hindi naman yan yung spotlight ng kahit anong Sona. We expect the President to speak mostly about domestic issues. Again, the survey has conveniently laid this out. Number one talaga yung how this administration is addressing corruption, specific to the flood control corruption issue. And finally also, again, yung price of goods talaga yung gustong marinig ng mga tao dito sa Sona ni President Marcos. Kanina sabi ni Undersecretary Claire Castro, based on the practice last night, of which may photos pa nila nilabas yung Malacanang, mga 1 hour, 20-minute long Sona. I would say that's the average length of a Sona siguro. But again, we'll see how Marcos handles the pressure that he placed on himself because of his speech last year and the external pressures. When we say external pressures, hindi lang siya from outside the Philippines, right? There are pressures that Malacanang is feeling within in terms of the domestic politics, not to mention yung impeachment trial of the Vice President. So all of this to say, it's not going to be an easy feat to squeeze all of that in 1 hour and 20 minutes. Of course, we don't expect the President to speak all on that. We expect him to focus again on these domestic matters.